how I built an $8.4 million property portfolio generating $310,000 rental income in less than 5 years. My name is Casey Taylor. I'm the host of the podcast, and in today's episode, we're talking about my personal portfolio and unpack a massive amount of detail as to how the property portfolio is at right now, the numbers on the portfolio, and what my plan of attack is moving forward with the portfolio. This one's going to have a lot of value in it. It's going to be very detail oriented, and I hope you see a lot of value in the episode. So let's get into it. Now, I've done episodes in the past on the portfolio. I probably won't go into every single property in depth like I have done in the past. So if you do want to hear about some of those early on purchases, you can go back and watch that previous episode. But if you haven't listened before, we started to purchase in March of 2020. Settled on my first property on the 20th of April 2020. Now, these properties and the last purchase was December 2024. So in that period of time, have been able to secure 10 properties and build a granny flat. So that's essentially where the portfolio is in terms of the property numbers. I don't really like to talk about how many properties because I think some people get hyped up on the number of properties. I've got 100 properties. I've got 200 properties, whatever it is. But that's not really important, the number of properties, because if you've got 100 shit boxes, then is it really 100 properties? You want to focus on just getting those quality assets that perform long term, that create the passive income goal you're after, create the net wealth base that you're after. That's the important part of that. And we want to focus on those quality assets that we can hold long term, that are going to continue to perform. So, current rental income of the portfolio is $310,960 per annum, to be exact. Now, the gross yield based on all investment properties, and that's just the caveat, the 10th property was the owner-occupied property. It was an emotional purchase. It wasn't a smart choice as such, which I'll delve into, but that was just a decision where the portfolio was at to make. However, gross yield on the investment properties right now versus the purchase price is 6.95%. So it's a pretty solid gross yield, and this is what people don't understand. Everyone's like, I'm just going to sit on the fence, wait for rates to drop. But you could have purchased and borrowed far less money 1, 2, 3 years ago, and then you get your rental income growth and your gross yield increases over time versus as capital growth outpaces rental income growth when you're purchasing, your gross yield's far lower than what you could have purchased a couple of years ago. And yeah, your rate might be a little bit lower, but it doesn't fucking mean anything because that gross yield on your original purchase price is lower. It's a massive mistake people make. And then you've had to borrow 100, 200K more for the same asset. Just doesn't make sense. So your rate's lower, but you borrowed not twice as much, but you've borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars more for the same asset. It's crazy for me to understand that and watch the decision other people make, or they just never purchase when they could have and made hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right, so the owner-occupied property, the way I had to do that, I purchased it 80%. I injected a big amount of cash into that purchase, and then I did leverage a little bit of equity as well for that purchase. But it costs $64,440 per annum to hold that property. That debt is not tax deductible because the owner-occupied property does not generate rental income. I don't deem it to be an asset. I only deem it to be an asset if it's generating income and we can claim the interest as a tax deduction because it's generating income. Speak to your accountant about that though. So the total debt is 5.515 mil. A lot of people would freak out looking at that, go, fuck, 5 million of debt. But this is what you have to do to build wealth. Reducing debt is not how you're going to become financially free. Leveraging good debt to build a larger wealth base is how you need to do it, and that's using other people's money. So the net wealth base is currently sitting at 2.885 mil, which you look 8.4 million property portfolio, still don't have 3 mil of net wealth base. But the longer you can hold that over time, the better. Now, with the investment properties, I just forgot to mention that part of it. Now, I'm not even going to deem this to be positive cash flow, but they're roughly paying $10,000 per year now. We've seen rates reduce a little bit this year, but just the rental income growth and increasing year on year, they're now in a position where having leveraged equity out of a number of those properties to purchase more properties, we're still in a position where the investment properties aren't costing anything to hold now. And if you do the numbers on that 5.5 mil, let's call it, in debt, every time we see a 0.25% rate reduction, that's 14K cash flow improvement on interest only. So it's pretty significant. Year to date, we've had a couple of rate cuts, so 0.5%. So the portfolio has improved that 28K. And as we see a couple more, that's going to improve further. So the more debt you have, the more powerful a rate reduction is. Now, I actually made a call to one of my financial institutions a couple of weeks ago to see if I can get a more competitive rate. And I only got 0.1% of a discount, nothing crazy, but for a half-hour phone call, it was about $1,600 saving in cash flow, which is a good exercise to do. So be proactive as a property investor. Don't wait for the bank to call you. Call them, speak to your mortgage broker and see what rate reduction you can get. Because that lender, each 0.25% reduction this year, they've passed that on, but then I was able to get 0.1% on top of that as well. So I'm just going to quickly spit off a couple of these properties. I'm not going to go into a massive amount of depth, but one property in particular that we bought off market exclusive to TPW so we settled in 2023, early 2023, bought it for 500K. Now, CoreLogic had that property listed at a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage. Agent didn't realize that. They looked at the data and I got that done at 500, which was under market value for a 4-bed property, let alone it being a 5. Now, the valuation on that property now is 830. I have been able to leverage equity out of that to go again into a couple more properties, which was last year, and I'll discuss those today in depth. But that property is now generating $660 per week as well in rental income. So the numbers on that one are cracking. It's just a good buy and hold property. It's performed really well, and that area was undervalued, and it really boosted in a quick period of time. We actually had a client that could have secured that, and they decided not to purchase, and they missed out on some massive growth there. Cool. That was one from a couple of years ago. Properties early on are performing well. The second purchase that I made, that one is, so I bought for $429,000, rents for $630 per week. Value now is $720,000. So it's done, I think it's about 64% in around 4 years, because I bought that around this time in 2021. But the powerful thing with that property is it's a high set property. It's only on a 600 meter square block, but we can put a granny flat on that property. Granny flat based on this LGA is only a 2-bed, 1-bath. So not a massive one in comparison to some other opportunities in other LGAs. However, that's just going to boost that cash flow again within the portfolio, and something that I'm going to come back and do. So the numbers, roughly the build on that one for the 2 and 1 is 200K, and then probably receive around 500 per week to be pretty conservative on that. So it's going to be a good injection into the portfolio. Now, I'll talk about the three purchases that I made last year. Now, the two purchases as investment properties that I made were secured in trust entities. Where I'm at in my portfolio, trusts are going to play an important part of that. I won't go into a massive amount of depth on the benefits of the trust lending. However, in a nutshell, once those entities can service themselves, aren't costing anything to hold, they can be excluded from servicing, which actually really boosts your borrowing capacity and allows you to continue to purchase. And that's how the really successful property investors build their wealth and build a large number of properties, right? Now, I'm actually going through and doing some refinancing now and some extractions for some things I'll get to in a moment. I've actually been able to exclude those couple of entities with a self-declaration that they are servicing themselves, which is powerful. So it just boosts more borrowing capacity. They're an entity on their own. I'm the sole director. I'm the beneficiary. However, it is a separate entity. So I don't own it per se. So there are some really, really solid benefits there. And this is where that investment savvy accountant specific to property is going to really benefit you. Now, those couple of purchases, one I secured for $565. It rents for $580 per week. So when I bought that property, tenants in place at $450 per week. So it was under market rent. Cost a bit to hold that property until we could re-rent that property this year. Tenants decided to move on anyway. Marketed at $580 per week we secured a tenant for. And this property we are building a dual occupancy on. So I'm in the process of getting all that sorted. We've done the prelim assessments. We're just waiting for build contracts, which I'm hoping to have by the end of this week. And then we'll be getting finance for that one to commence that shortly. Now, the dual occupancy, I'll give a brief overview. I've actually, same day recording this episode, recorded an in-depth strategy on the dual occ play. So that will be a good episode you can go and watch and really understand what that's about. But essentially, this particular property, 800 meters squared, we will build a second 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-garage on this property. It has side access. They'll be able to drive down the right-hand side of that property and there'll be a second dwelling. We'll strata title those. There'll be a massive equity uplift on this play. And that new property at the back is going to be positive cash flow from day one. It's a really solid strategy we're implementing right now for those investors who want to be proactive, who just really want to build their equity quickly. Yes, you can buy and hold and build equity quickly in those right locations, prime for growth. But if on top of that you can split, create a couple of dwellings, strata title them, it's very powerful to build equity very quickly and go again into another marketplace. So that's the first one. It's valued roughly at $670 already. So only 12 months ago, I think I settled on it at the end of July 2024. And yeah, it's grown just over 100K in that period of time. I haven't done anything to that property. Now, second property that I purchased, which I bought one after the other essentially. I think I settled on this one at the end of August. Very similar play, actually in the same suburb. So this property I secured for $560,000. Now it was on a 1,200 meter squared block. So essentially the same price as the other property. However, this one needed a reno. It looked like something from the 70s or 80s. So had to do kitchen replacement, bathroom replacement, full paint internally. And then we did the external frontage of the property as well because it was a terrible green looking color. and we did flooring throughout the property as well. And yeah, just some other little bits and pieces. So the reno on that was about 45K. Rents now for 550 per week. And this is another dual occ play that we will do. Now that property is valued at $700,000 now. And that the val comes in a little higher, larger piece of land. And essentially when we do dual occ on that one, it's going to be 2 600 meter squared blocks, which is crazy value. There's land alone selling in this area for 560. So I got the build included, but I got 2 pieces of land essentially for that same price. Did really well on that one. Secured it prior to auction, and because there was that reno involved, not heaps of people wanted that play. So that was a really good buy, and it's going to serve very well in the future. The dual lock on that one, so we'll build a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage, build for $450,000. That on a 600 meter squared block will be circa 750 once that build's done. So it's probably, it's going to manufacture around 300K worth of equity. Now the plan is I will pull the trigger on the first property secured at that 565 first, that we're in the plans. As soon as that build's done, I'm going to have my finance in place, so then we can just start that next build essentially as soon as that one's done. So I'm just doing one at a time. Knowing me, I'll probably do that sooner, because that's just what I'm like. But yeah, that's the plan with those 2 properties. And this is something I'm really going to start to implement in my portfolio moving forward, is the trust lending. And I really am going to start being more active and not only getting in that area prime for growth, but I want to manufacture growth as well. My goal, which we'll discuss as well, is I want to hit 20 mil as a gross number in the property portfolio. So we'll get to that. So with the owner-occupied purchase, which we settled in December of 2024, this purchase, I just got sick of dealing with useless property managers, essentially. The rent vesting strategy served extremely well. Was able to really build the portfolio based on that. But with the portfolio where it was at, I just had enough. There was multiple things we were dealing with the property managers, essentially just being useless and not doing anything with issues. So I was actually with my broker looking to get pre-approval on another investment property, and I just switched it up and went down the owner-occupied route. Found this property, really liked the property, and they actually wanted 1.35, essentially, is what the agent said. It was going to auction. At that time, when we're looking in November 24, because the area wasn't essentially affordable, its borrowing capacity ceiling at the moment, and median days on market was roughly around 60 days. And you had time in comparison to these other areas we target where median days on market is 14 days. But it was just really hard to not act emotionally and just pay over just to get the property and get it done. So I had to sit on our offer for, I think it was a couple of weeks. Went in at 1.15. They pretty much said that's ridiculous. Went up to 1.21, and I sat there for a good while, and they ultimately did take it. The agent did a good job at not giving too much away on their situation, but we later found out that they'd actually purchased another property, and they had to kind of get it done. So yeah, secured for 1.21, and I think that was a really good buy for the property, based on some comparables we're looking at. And the agent tried to use those to get me up in price, and I stuck to the guns, which was painful and hard because there was emotions involved, but just got a reval on this one done last week because we're extracting equity and got 1.3 mil. So back up to 80%, roughly extracting 75K. That's going to be put towards a kitchen, laundry, and flooring reno. And this is the power of equity. Once you have that equity, you don't have to use cash. All right. So adding more value back, which is in my brain and how it works. This was an emotional purchase, so I want to still be able to add some value to this property, essentially to still create some wealth from it. And I'll talk about, I guess, some plans of attack with that owner-occupied purchase as well. Where we are located, we do have some water views at the back of the property on the deck and in the front yard. Nothing where you can really say property's got a water view. However, because it's a 2-story property, I'm going to look at doing an extension on the back portion of that property upstairs, and that's going to create some solid water views from that. And that's where we'll be able to really add some value to the property. So I guess what my goals are moving forward over the next 12 months is I want to get those 2 purchases I made last year as investment properties completed as dual ocs. I'm just using conservative numbers as I always do with this thing, which is 200K of equity manufactured in each of those deals. And then my plan of attack will be to leverage that equity into further purchases. I'm very aggressive. I don't fuck around. If I've got the equity there, I will put it to work because that is what's going to build wealth long term. I have no interest of trying to reduce my debt as much as possible. I'm going to leverage and use other people's money to build my wealth base. I'd want to get another couple of new purchases in a new location in a new state. I'm not going to discuss where yet because that's going to come up in a further episode shortly. We've started to move into that location for clients. So we'll be leveraging into a new location. And I want to get another dual OC purchase as well to be able to do that strategy again. And like I said, that's something moving forward I'm going to be doing a lot of. I'm going to start to really manufacture equity on top of those areas prime for growth. I want to hit 10 mil property portfolio in the next 12 months and just completing the renovation I discussed on the owner-occupied property, which that's going to happen in the next couple of months. Just waiting for formal approval and we'll get that one rumbling. And then what I'll probably do is once we add that value, I'll get another valuation completed and see how much is there, and I might pull some equity out of there and go into another purchase. That's the goals for the next 12 months. Now, I said my goal, and I will probably shift the goalpost on this, but my goal is to build a $20 million property portfolio. Because if we then look at a conservative growth rate of 5% per year, that is $1 million worth of growth every single year that it's increasing. So naturally, my net wealth base will appreciate each year quite strongly based off those numbers. I'll probably hit that and say, why not go a little bit more? However, that's what I'm working towards. And I don't give a fuck about the fancy cars, the watches. My spending has not changed much, despite obviously the property portfolio increasing. Over the last 5 years, I have focused on increasing my income dramatically. And the more income you have, the more borrowing capacity you have, and the more property you can purchase. So it's a pretty simple one. Now, for each one of my purchases, I made sure that the property was under market value in areas prime for growth, except for my owner-occupied property. I still bought that well, but I knew that that property was not going to perform strongly in the short to medium term. Last thing, and I've just touched on this a moment ago, I have not increased my expenses and my spending habits in line with my income. I've barely increased my expenses in comparison to 5 years ago when I was making far less money. Like I said, I don't care for the fancy cars, the shiny watches, all of that. I've focused on my cash flow. I've really just only put my cash into more properties. That's what I've done. I do have a goal of buying a boat eventually, and I keep pushing that further and further away as I continue to buy more property. But I'm at the position now where I could even just leverage some equity to be able to pay for that boat. I'll probably do it in cash at some period, but at the moment, I just understand what's going to happen in the future and that performance, and I really want to take advantage of that. That's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been insightful, and we'll see you on the next episode.